I'm soaring, friends. I am Vitaly Portnikov. Our today's broadcast will be dedicated to the topic. We say we are with you almost all the uprisings days, Namagayu dark process. I have unpacked, I have VD Axios, had about 28 points in public. Of the so-called SOAP plan of the American President Donald Trump, Yaki on the Truth revealed a SOAP plan put on the American side by Russian officials Yuri Ushakov. Ta Kirill Dmitriev about Namagan for being beaten by sanctions from the states obtained by Rosneft's Prot Luka. And we are fine with you, of course. Even then these processes were not unpacked in a dose, becoming for Ukraine for Ukrainian. With a serious trial of the fact that at the same time, we are not back with you. I am concrete obvious as a sign that the right collapses to the mayor, and we are not with you, and the adoration received in the state is dead to the homeland of the measuring process. The president with the received in the state, continuing on the polygates on the fact that we are close. And with Yaki our European partners are gratified in Tigru on himself, not with the president with the received states Donald Trump, with his greatest honed, and even with that Riva understanding. I am today allowing us to go to the continuation of the temple battle, and with the staff received. The continuation of the understanding, the continuation of the Viskova, to the continuation of the exchange of intelligence information, and it is extremely important that we do not give up in the wrong situations to continue to the Russian Federation. Because it's different. And see so-called Mir plan is not a sanctioned vice from the received states to Moscow. Not sanctions, Prots, Rosneft and Lukoil. They came yesterday to mish the American and Ukrainian delegations, and the Zahid media are skeptically put to the point that the continuation of the entire peace process and the chair still does not go into the principle of torture until now. I have a real understanding. That's what I'm still just saying. Ukraine is not ready for Russia's territorial actions, and it will also be accurate until the withdrawal of Ukrainian troops from those territories defending the advancing Russian Federation. And we also know about Kill and the withdrawal of Ukrainian troops from the Ukrainian land. There is a Russian Putin's Ochilnik, his American colleague, who is handing over on Tilka. And Russia is not adoration raised in the fire of the Russian-Ukrainian. So those diplomatic maneuvers overestimate the Namagani Zasku from the side with those received in the state. Donald Trump's side. According to this position, those who are on the so-called Myar process Mish, Ukraine and Russia are Bilsho and meshed. I'm sitting on the self-supporting Secretary of the United States Marco Rubio. I'm K with all my knowledge of the arguments. Trump Namagatsia, you mean readings, the political framework of the process. They are devoted to the sovereignty and independence of Ukraine and to the European, and not to the pro-Russian image of our state and our ISD. And now on the topic of the President of Ukraine, already in a friend, you can get food to France. To meet with the President of Emmanuel Macron. You can exhale and torture, and what is needed here is not in this visa to Paris, literally through the Sprat, after the French and Ukrainian presidents have already held their own. But the fact that the international situation has changed before Karen. There are also ordinary presidents, children, just as part of the process of imitating the polar plan. The main character is like Trump. And it is not necessary for the president to be a self-appointed American Ochilnik and difficult moments. And Macron is an important partner here. Maybe Macron also makes special contacts with Donald Trump in order to talk to him about those points of my plan. About the American president and how the slave presence documents you can just read. And not know it's easier to talk with him in a corner. And I would say those special contacts of Macron and with Trump. Then his teams helped the French president organize the sweep of Vladimir Zelenskyy. And the special sign of the president with the turns received in the state by Steve, we can say in Trump's ear. Well, not so in the ear. And all in the ear. Yak yak is not known in the ear, but with food to Moscow today in May I will arrive. I have already arrived to Moscow. I will find myself escorting Trump's son-in-law Yali to Kushin, actively participating in the dark process. And on a friend, the number on a friend of Grudnya is planned to be Ratsmova. President Putin from the coils and me Kushner. And richly who respects the time of the deposits, becoming Americans to the polar plan, that he is, of course. With what the President of the Russian Federation is ready to do in truth. Yak on the exchange of Putin's speech at the Kyrgyz capital Bishkek. And we discussed in detail, without overestimating the greedy Sumny, that the President of Russia is drunkenly and unjustly guilty. And literally alive. Here the Tsars in Russian helmets had rejuvenating apples. I didn't want to sacrifice him now to get too high on the throne. And Putin's rejuvenating apple is the bend of Ukraine. To that, with such gratitude and joy, the Russian Ochilnik will also give our Ukraine. And he himself will shrink in the date. The apple has rotted. And this is that Macron Starmer and Zelenskyy talked to Vitkoff on the pallet of his trip to the Russian capital. This is already a positive factor. The fact that when hiring a special representative of the president with received in the state will know these lines of hearts. Yaks and not Europeans, and they are not elected transitions. And the yaks are still being led away by Washington in one way or another. Well, and one more important point, a tied visit. Macron on Wednesday, you hand over literally 2 days later, and send a visit to the People's Republic of China. For the head of the People's Republic of China, Xi Jinping. And we, of course, still have the heads of the People's Republic of China to deposit economically Petro-Russia in wine from Ukraine. And Putin's obvious ally and adoring our Ukraine Tilky on mind. The adoration of Xi Jinping Bacha and Putin. I am not yet so when I am not a loser, I have yet to leave with an imperious economical interest. And Vrahovi folding, economical and political bags and overgrown became between China Xi Jinping and America and Trump. And also economically Tilky and wine. Moreover, your guilt can go into a hot phase of phone calls for the American president. Sitting Pin Chitko emphasized the word Taiwan. So in those situations, I demand with the knowledge of Xi Jinping arguments from Europe, a yak with a platform for the exploration of its economy. For the sale of Chinese goods when hiring on bilsh privleveni and bilsh on filthy mines. Niches of sales of Chinese products with the received staff of America. It is also important for Zelenskyy to discuss with Macron the position of the French president with the loans of his direct, with the head of the People's Republic of China, and on the truth, Xi Jinping extremely cannot swim at Putin. So that the Russian president sees the very idea of flooding the Ukrainian territories and integrating these territories into the warehouse of the Russian Federation. Maybe I'll tell him and propa on him in the fire. It was in vain that firm the president with the Joseph Biden staff I received, having dragged my bags of Xi Jinping. In order to signal Vladimir Putin's mind about not for nuclear dumping and Russian-Ukrainian guilt, they gave signs. And a nuclear dumping decision about shoving was negotiated on the Kremlin sidelines. Again it became a Schwij projectile to blackmail Nietzsche's real dumping on the battlefield. Then it is possible to grow these contacts with the head of the People's Republic of China in order not to discuss when hiring. And it is possible to burn in the fire on the Russian-Ukrainian front with the worsts there would be a real concrete result for guilt. Also, we are with Podeva Pozyazhny, and I have not yet real minds for the prip of Russian-Ukrainian guilt in the 20s and 30s. It does not add up so for a protracted period. And where there is not there, no one knows yet, I will develop politically after the armada on the Russian-Ukrainian front fall silent. So in the topic of Zelenskyy's visit to Macron, the U is crazy geopolitical firm places. Reason needs to be clearly said even in a situation where Yaka is tied up firm the Russian-Ukrainian guilt for once reading tortures, tying. And with the fact that we negotiate with our partners and it's easier for us to not, and the process is so talked about Paris. In principle in Paris we chull about three aspects. I am not in the Ukrainian American and Ukrainian European, which means that it is not possible to reach a real understanding from Russia between an ally and a real understanding. Here we go through 3 points clearly grown. The moment is territorial torture. The President of the Russian Federation, Putin, insists that in order to negotiate the completion of military ideas, it may be the style of the Ukrainian army to once again take over the territory of the Donetsk region today is under our control. All Russians repeat the experience for Putin a long time ago, I would say may existenti, and that he is extremely busy with his Vitkoff on the whole territory of the Donetsk and Lugansk regions, of the 24th fierce 2020 other rock. I'll be forehand soon. And before the occupation, when hiring everyone up to the Russian army and gave Ive. And Putin took over the entire territory, firm, and without further victims. Here I am sprat torturing buckets. And Yak Zagoli look there, and the situation from the Ukrainian point of view is still our Visko will overestimate these places. And defends on the 4th for the 11th Rik. And I want to tell you that the Russian saboteurs, all these bandits Strelkov, all the pillowcase, there we were at Kramatorsk Slavyansky. Here the Slavonic Zagoli is the beginning of all the Russian march and the abominations on Ukrainian soil. There was a people's mayor, there was all this stuff. I wanted to unleash a full-scale Russian-Ukrainian war, a war to the edge. The Russians believed that he would not be able to, and the Ukrainian power Tilky would help the saboteurs. And he also beat up the necessary infantrymen, tanks and drones and missiles. And in their frenzied potential, I am from that hour directly at the Ukrainian state, at the peaceful Ukrainians. Tesh absolutely understood the situation. Well, in that respect, we don't give up everything, obviously. Yak on Mina. And I'm also Putin of separation, and such an act. Wines exactly, without guessing about the Paris and Kherson regions, and whale skins, are recorded in the Russian constitution. Contagion in Trump's plan, and a wonderful idea yet. There the conflict will be frozen. What does frozen mean? Frozen means conflict, and it is possible to unfreeze and moments. Who can believe Russia, that she will say that she is ready to turn her territories, Tilki Myarny Shlyak? I am that she will be in Zagoli, and we are the counselors of our Ukrainian territories. Well, I'm not the one who looks out of the situation from Putin's point of view, and I will talk extremely about the process of turns. I'm still Vitkoff, bringing him the Trump tie, will make a statement about recognizing the Crimea there and the Donbass as Russian. And American legislation cannot be implemented by law, which means there will be a new American president, who can spit on these words of Trump. I can tell you that there is a similar precedent for sleep. Now the term is the stay of Donald Trump on the presidential estate with the received in the state. Cola Trump torture out of so-called and pleasing, and Abraham I was out of direct on normalization of the bag. Due to the low Arab Ukraine from Israel. Fought 4 diplomatic bags with Israel to be seen in Morocco. And in Rabbit they said, we Americans are called our sovereignty over Zahid Sahara. Sugar 4 that I was there, Spanish colonial fragrance, alcohol on the territory. The Polisario Front is represented by the interests of the people of Zahid Sahara from the point of view of the United Nations. Having voted on the territory of the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic, allegedly for a low-power retinue. Rich powers, and a member of the League of African Powers. And you know, let's say about neighboring Algeria, and Morocco respects the Sahara from its natural territory. On its territory, it is a province of Morocco. From the point of view of Morocco, Trump made such a statement. The Americans said they would oppose the autonomy of Zahid Sahara in the warehouse of Morocco. And Trump spent Vlad, and before Vlad came the administration of Joseph Biden. The interest in the knowledge of the Zahid Sahara parts of Morocco is intense. The new administration of Nicola did not emphasize to Vaga that she was in Zagoli, and the process of continuing the prostate in the Western Sahara in the warehouse of Morocco is visible. You are all Tilki over Trump to Vlada. With the Crimea from Donbass, it can be itself, and so. What Putin has so far caused the situation of Crimea and Donbass to be officially caused to the regions of the Russian Federation. They can cause on the legislating Rivna in America, but the kind of sovereign cordon of Russia does not have such tools for Donald Trump. The fact that the path extremely wants to be satisfied is simply the statements of the American president. There will be a certain sound in 2020 with a smart voice, and there will be no president in the 29th. Well, it's not enough to believe. And the date for him is that we really can. Atmata? You know the Crimea and Donbass to the Americans, and legally no one will be able to look. And on the niche that Putin is perfectly clear. So territorial torture is overstated by a fantastic story in the subject of negotiation. Friend torture. I am a penny of Ukraine's finances. Here I am just today in Paris, saying that it is unfair that those pennies are still in Europe, that they are being given to Ukraine in sight. And the Minister of the Off-the-Wall Inquiries of Bergia, calling the very idea of expropriating Russian assets an adventure. And the finances of a classic European loan are buried. I and the Europeans do not like overgrown plants, which is absolutely obvious. And the fact that Ukrainians are circumventing the American test of American, the test of frozen Russian assets. Guilt can reach from year to year from Americans by one value to what Americans have assets. And in the current American-European droughts, Americans and instruments that have swum into Europe, so that it will go with such an adventure. I will not crypto on my American one, then the Europeans have serious beatings back in European Ukraine, and are in Belgium. Before serious problems for the UC of the European financial system, and for the desertion of assets from European funds of a number of powers can still guide them can check Russia's shares in such situations. Then a difficult situation like us, of course. And Thash the whole situation, she's looking like a friend. This is nutrition. I do not look like you are resolved, and the Europeans, and the fact that in 2026 I will need a hand for Ukraine. They gave me to fight, and I will continue and again. Because half of our budget, in fact, is still a living Ukraine, these are donors. And we can't earn our pennies because our economy has been cleared by the Russian occupiers. And the Russians are ready to go on and on. It is known that we will continue to increase our investments in the Russian economy. And the fact that the Europeans are helping us, we can allow Russia to be planted effectively. I will not do it yet. We will lay out Ukraine, and like Russia, and simply and with our European Union. Ukraine is on the verge of Russia to the European chord. A friend is such a moment. And the third point. And Zagoli was absolutely unreasonable from the point of view of the fact that I am the whole guarantee of look and guarantees for Russia. To make everyone feel that we are really enviable guarantees, that we can't be attacked yet, and that's all serious growl. About what I say so much. To be honest, I'm not sure, and with the receipt of the state, I will decide to close the road to NATO for Ukraine. President Trump's position is an anti-American position. Trump's anti-Euro-Atlantic position, a voluntarist position, is not a strategic position. And what does Trump understand? I still can't see Ukraine in NATO, because with the receipt of the state, the decision is made on a unilateral basis. And the decision with the ones received in the state is extremely not about Canada. Well, and another such problem, even the Biden administration was gravely put, let's say, before Ukraine was requested before us. Then the Allies and the Americans showed up on them. Tesh. Obvious such moments. NATO figures on me guarantee that Ukraine and its members will defend Ukraine in times of aggression. Territories. We do not know at a discount Trump will be ready to defend the European Ukraine kind of aggression, yak kind will be, say, on the side of the Russian Federation. And I'm not really going to defend it yet. Then the torture of NATO in the hall is a guarantee tool, and I sleep. And that it scurries calm on the Arkushik and in our memory. We will also respect NATO guarantees and sleep, and in the topic at times the sight of guilt in Europe in the future we can pob. And scroll ideas are allowed. And even if Trump doesn't want us, Donata. Guarantees. Trump also notes that he says that the guarantees and I will be the presence of American investors. And explained in the signing of the difficult years about minerals, about the American President Nikola is not President Trump. The Russians bombed an American factory in Mukik with direct fire. Such a rank of demonstrator that the President of the American States has received no one, and his name is not Yak. Well, not like Donald Trump, and not Yak. And Trump, who understood all of it, talked about the fact that American investments in Ukraine. And my guarantees are ridiculous, and the fact that the Russians can calmly kill an American investor. With a clear hit of a caliber a dagger. And before the beating, the American Fox News. So the investment is guaranteed. What can be a guarantee? General Valery Pon says that there may be a guarantee from the placement of nuclear discharges on the cordons of Ukraine. Then in Ukraine itself. And here's Senator Lindsey Graham-Neeky. Let's put all the basic ideas laid down, clearly saying that such a budo cannot. We can generally in a rich moment about the counter. I can say both clearly and clearly. Not I, as a real guarantee, could give a guarantee that Russia's aggression in Maybutna is unclear in nature. About NATO, NATO needs a Tilka guarantee for what has not been checked. The guarantee can also be the legislators' formalized readiness to fight in the state and the mind from Ukraine to the mind of the new Russian Anapa. And with the received states, they will also mean readiness to nuclear guilt with a distinct overshadowing of the strategic component. I do not believe that the American president is the American president and not the Ukrainian one. She will torture Prushev for Galamev. The yak is extracted, not the yak, not to profit. What you will visit in Yaki international lands are registered guarantees of Ukraine. You know that for you there is no Nikola, no guarantor, and the fault cannot be repeated once. You just can't cheat. And I can say that there will be a real guarantee. You are the decline of Russia. Well, it's simple. I'm still surviving in 1 yard as a gopnik, then you can have a counselor even more, you will have that is. A guide to the yard and the apartment, then nothing is loaded for you. It will also be revealed that your guide is elected to fight with a gopnik. I will punish you. And the gopnik will accompany you, turn around to the house, break down the doors of your darkness. And you are already being sawed off by such a wonderful ceremony of seeing off, then I guarantee that this is just a moment of peace. And the gopnik will not catch you. And you can also stay a gopnik, that he can't stay there. And gopnik also has serious health problems. And he needs to think, and yak zali survive himself. And moves and polycars. And the gopnik just doesn't get to your door, there's still a lot of drinking, and we can't help but get hungover. That's your guarantee or a gopnik reduction. Maya Buda brought our cutting idea to Russia. There is no guarantee of a repetition of Russia's guilt against Ukraine, which will be a political miracle. And we are with you on the highest hands, and Pashim completion of the Russian-Ukrainian guilt is not Maya. It means that we need to fight for the completion of the guilt and will continue from the efforts to evict Russia. Miaski Boz Hevelny, the kind of economical equipment with Russia will help Jack to see the Vimata of Trump and turns. And by the hands and important by the feet. There's also a leg and maybe dollars. But still not the moment. Tomorrow, Pobachi Proid Oyster, Putin and Vit. I won't see any real results there until then. I didn't talk about the results of my split with Russian President Trump. In my deadline. Putin is ready to the point that he does not include the non-admin Vitkoff prip in the fire and into his hands. For Putin's scenario for one side. In the fire, and behind the Trump scenario and economical in Russia, and with the continuation to Ukraine. I have these two approaches, let's say, in a very good torture. Yak, I think. Well, here's the day after all. So I'll ask them who. Ether. And not subscribe to my channel, subscribe. I'm guessing right now that we demo millions with you on the channel, and already at a time we can say 12,000 have ended. Don't waste up to 1 million channel, so I'm going to ask you if you often haven't subscribed to the channel on 12,000 Ether. Subscribe? What do you think about French? About the fact that Europe is for Ukraine in such difficult moments. Put these tools in the Podobeki, and I will help you in the channels in Diachny. Well, I'll try to give you overgrown vidpovedi on the types of Tanya have already come to the air. You often talk about incompetent politicians. You don't respect a politician. Expand the policies, and what criteria for the effectiveness of the policy. But the theme is not easy to give up. Politics is such a profession itself. Yaki Booth Insha is a normal job. And you also want to become a Lika. Lika. You graduate from a medical institute, that is, you can go to college, and even to work as an orderly. Why are you on the chat at the institute with Rocky? They also go to the anatomical theater. What if you see it, Lord? Then you start practicing. You have dozens, hundreds of ailments. Anamnesis, understanding of the situation, washing is often tragic. I'll take the protocols away. The understanding of the self goes out of the protocol in non-standard situations. You gain dosvidu that you are a surgeon. You are through bilsh to the illuminated people. You are in the machine, an hour passes, and you are doing it. And you studied not to be a medic, but to be an engineer. They take you by the hand, go out to the operative, and seem to be rich. You don't get it removed by a head surgeon. Well, what will he cut out? Dive out and get lost. But we don't give up, that this is an absolutely obvious speech. Yak in Zagola develops traditional politics in western Ukraine. Contagious and everywhere. They have a more political look. Look more political. She is a liberal conservative, social democrat. She's navidity gifts for her choices. It is, of course, a one-time region. And I'll see the youth organization of the party and take a look. I'll take a look, because the politics of the look, the distribution of buckwheat to those who did not bathe in buckwheat, for example. Career in the topic of going to work in a political party. Clean up to Vlada's organs, and there. He is a member of the National Parliament. You show up in the back of the lavas in the minister, you spoil forever with the landing. But supposedly elementary dosvid, then these politicians can shvidku eyelids there, let's say, shvidch. And all one past the roads. And is it possible to climb the ladders into the chair of the head of the state for a TV show? So is it effective for Donald Trump to climb the ladder into the chair of the head of state? Not. There are hundreds more performance criteria. In the hundreds of understanding of the fact that you are supposedly going through a political process, there are still compromises. So I am democracy itself. But in Ukraine, there are uprisings, and it is clear that there is no political process. And on the right, it's not that the president's party was allegedly created literally in one day, and voted for sprats from Ukrainians, did not know the deputy for voting for visibility and readiness. And what is nothing so imaginative for those people digging? But he digs. She thinks you're buying back. That's the problem. Not for the water. After all, hundreds of dossiers of politics means 100 to the criterion of professionalism. I want to tell you more that there is a perdition that I say in the 2019 kind I removed the Zelenskyy president. I also perished in the 2013 kind I spoke and took President Poroshenko. I say that Poroshenko, despite the fact that he has a Vago and a political dosvid and a loan of the massacre of the Pozad, and that is, a politician, began a political format. He has Okoli in politics, not trusting rich people. Zaki is a political shlyak on the vitamin of people there in the post-maiden politics of Yulia Tymoshenko. Well, it's just Poroshenko's career, the politics of the orchestra. And the fact that Poroshenko has taken over the body of the Pozad in the Ukrainian government is a criterion of professionalism. And ready to counter with a political tool. The fact that no one knows about them. Intuitively. And there's also a president in this sprat. Both in Europe and for the political process. I was honest, sprats with professionals because of these people vote simply because they speak with Gassel, and, by their choice, declare the parties of one soundboard, and so I dig out, and their sign is not a prefix to get up, visit and declare scammers. Petrograd populist political parties for their non-domineering popularity. And then it appears that these people in the Zagolin of Yakin's politics sound like an agent of the ministry Zakrodonik on the right. Austria was you on the ultra-right, and in order to show more intellectuals to the ultra-right forces in Austria, she became a teacher of an external political department, failures on her own with Putin. Apzali in Russia. How do you think she got a horseshoe in Russia? Prices are ticks of our sparrows. I believe something in this to us power. For Europe, we say and so, and the whole European, is still the torture of the sovereignty of the European Ukrainians. And ours is not our robe. That's the whole situation tied up for you. Why is China contagious on an honest scale, buying soybeans all over the world? Extremely from a conspiracy point of view, it could be said that before guilt, but from an Israeli point of view, stocks. I have read more, there is still a lot of procurement there, but Ukraine is aiming to buy more richly in billions. And it can be overgrown. The moment is not coping. Rural estates. China also needs purchases. That he did not submit a Ukrainian plan to complete the guilt. But President Sprat presented in Ukraine a European plan to end the guilt. And you're perfectly sweeps. And in Trump's plan, it was important to act from the alternative plan, so as not to look like people. I specifically want Trump to create, can't finish the Russian-Ukrainian guilt. And imitation is in decline. Our head is not there with the received states and not piles. Here are the Europeans, the alternative plan is also good, adequate. Points Vetro can afford such a luxury that you can trump. And we can't afford the luxury that what we need is American, and it's an unrealistic policy. Well, it looks like that. Why do Americans choose the president in the winter? I've been needing even floors for a long time. Well, not for once. I would say that the whole story with the fact that the president with a skin lesson standing with the elder. The whole story will remain a cadence. What was Barack Obama and not Bill Clinton? And George W. Bush and Jimmy Carter, but there were senior presidents there. I'm Colonel Dragon, George H.W. Bush. Was in the form that Biden and Trump are in. In the American political system, I am both a Democratic and a Republican Party. So I got lost with the politics of medicine. I'm also not going to continue this with my political career and not do it, and for some reason, I can't tell you so measures, well, supposedly say measures for the political system. Bring into the system for plugging not all the production of the accumulated results. I'm in the Duma process in Israel. There was a political rivalry between Ariel Sharon and Shimon Peres. And the life of politics doesn't seem to be, and I'm trying that you forget in Israel on my political system. What a production! But now we know to what, to the rule of one, especially on Benjamin Netanyahu. And just there is a post on the landing of the Prime Minister of Israel. Since Putin has a post on the landing of the President of Russia. The blockage of the political system is not guaranteed for democracy. In the United States, it is a practical kind of Beulah. It seemed to you that voting for populists in the 2019 kind of European trends. And why do you implement Europe in this way? And there are no more Dolics on your thought, extremely Dolics. I still think that I respect voting for a populist in Europe, but I will just say that this is a continental trend. For black and white, kind and not kind. And the trend. The adoration of Ukrainians for Nazareth, and that we did not come out with you from the political Vic. So spread the populace. And I'll lay out the European one. Mats are European layout, and not Russian, not Russian. Oh, still giving the Kremlin buckets of the approach in theory to Donbass, buckets to say that we want more Kherson for the Mykolaiv Odessa region. But there's also salami tactics. We will accept from the Cobb that he has yet to get out of the territory of the Donetsk region. Demoralized. We guess that there are 2 more subjects of the Russian Federation on the Ukrainian troops are in occupation. And it is possible, and the reason is so on salts. But I am Adolf Hitler, the Tseki, one might say, the spiritual leader of Putin and the Russians deal with Czechoslovakia. Without saying Czechoslovak, I want to occupy you. There are Germans living here, but there are Germans with Crimea, and Russians in Crimea. Sacred land. And everyone said, well, I guess I've overgrown Trump in Ukraine, but it seems, of course, that Trump is just in the spirit of Munich water. EBA. Well, it looks like, well, the Czechs have seen in spending fortifications, that's how we can spend on Donbass. And Hitler's laying out of the president's lag declares the Czechoslovakian to be wasting territory and demoralized. Czechoslovakia Protectorate of Bohemia and Moravia. Wallpaper bomb Prague, and that's it. And you, Mr. President, will be the protector. So on. And this is the salami tactic, it's up to us and so you shove it. To the fact that I still extort buckets of everything, you can open and reshuffle the opera. And if they are often on the cut, then maybe the Ukrainians themselves have captured it. Well, we have tikied Donbass enough to see Putin and not to be guilty. And Ukraine has seen, he bought half of Ukraine, and what are we up to here? And then the will of the Ukrainian people was added. So it's absolutely clear. Tactics of I am a Renaman. It makes sense. Well, we gave a stitch for the podium. Ostensibly, of course, and are also important to all of us. We gave behind a prompt process. Tomorrow, Vitkoff will knock with Putin. Chervnikov's diplomacy will continue for those who are on the air on the channel and are not subscribed to the channels. So, Sign the Weasel, who makes millions on the channel, has completed only 12,000. That the channel has become a hookah of the channel millions, just such a boom according to Freud, is already over. So subscribe to hookah, to the channel. Survive your health. A girl verified to be you. Put a podobaiku? Comment. With the tools of the channel and shoes, yes, it helps the discarded forces of Ukraine. The yaks, of course, are the bulls and will be the main instrument of our sovereignty and our independence in my everyday life.